Okay, welcome back. In this video, I'm going to show you how to add animation to fire layers. Then we will learn how to distribute layers in 3D space. And finally, how to add and animate a camera to have a real 3D space in After Effects. Okay, as the first step, let's work on these fire layers and let's add a wiggle animation to each layer to simulate a fire effect. But before that, let's talk about anchor point. So let's zoom in a little bit and let's increase the resolution. Okay. When I select one of these fire layers, as you can see, the anchor point is here on the center of the layer. Let me change the color to make it more obvious, for example, purple. Okay, now here you can see the anchor point. I want to scale the fire from the top point, somewhere around here, and scale it in this direction only. So the anchor point shouldn't be here, because if I scale it, it will be scaled from the center. I want this fire layer to be scaled from this top point. To do this, I want to use this pan behind tool or press the Y key. So put your mouse over this green axis and move the anchor point in Y direction until you get to this top point. Okay, now let's do the same process for these two other fire layers. Activate pan behind tool and move the anchor point to the top. And again for the last fire layer. And now if I scale this fire 1 layer, as you can see, it will be scaled from the top and not the center. This is what I was looking for. Okay, great. Activate the selection tool again. Okay, now I want to animate these fire layers using a wiggle effect that is controlled by one slider. To do this, let's add a null object. Hit return key and rename it to control. We can move this null object to the corner of the screen. Let's put it here, okay. Now from the menu, choose Effect, Expression Controls, a Slider Control. After Effects immediately opens this effect controls for you, but if you can't see it, simply from the menu choose Effect, Effect Controls, or press F3 on your keyboard. Okay, now click on this small lock button to hold this panel open for the control layer. Now if you click on the other layers, After Effects keeps this panel open for you. Click on a slider control property and hit return key and rename it to, for example, fire scale. Okay, now I want to control the scale property of these fire layers by this fire scale slider. So as the first step, select the layer and press the S key to load the scale property. Click here to hide this chain button to be able to change the scale values separately in X, Y, and Z directions. I want to animate this fire only in Y direction, so we have to hold the X and Z values constant on 100%. So hold the Alt key and click on this stopwatch. After Effects will create a script for this property automatically. Let's delete it. Okay. I want to animate the scale in Y direction using a wiggle effect that will add random values to a scale Y and it will simulate a fire effect for us. A wiggle expression in After Effects is a piece of JavaScript code that allows to move, scale, and rotate a layer back and forth in a random fashion. So let's write several lines of code here. We need a variable, let's name it wig. Wig equals to wiggle25. The first parameter is frequency. That defines the number of times your layer will wiggle per second, this case 25 times. Now add a comma and then 15. This second parameter is amplitude that defines how much it will move up and down, this case 15 pixels. And finally add a semicolon and hit return key. Here we have three parameters for the scale X, Y, and Z. I don't want to change the scale X and Z. The x-axis is to the right, and the z-axis is perpendicular to the plane and outwards. So let's type an open bracket for the first parameter, that is scale x, and as I told you before, I don't want to change it, so let's enter 100%. For the second parameter, I want to use the wig variable. In After Effects, scale x is the first parameter that we refer to it with number 0. Scale Y is the second parameter and we refer to it with number 1. and we refer to scale Z with number 2. So now when I want to use wiggle effect as the second parameter, so I have to write wig open bracket 1 close bracket. It means we control the scale Y with the wiggle effect. And finally, let's write 100% as a scale Z value. Okay, by default, we can't animate the wiggle effect. To solve this problem, I can multiply the scale value with a number, and I control this number by this fire scale slider control. If I enter number 1 for this slider, our scale won't be changed. If I enter a number below 1, it will be scaled down, and if I enter a number bigger than 1, it will be scaled up. So let's multiply this scale script by the slider value. Click and drag this pick whip icon over the fire scale slider. Now After Effects will multiply our current scale value by a number that is defined in this slider. Okay, great. Now my slider value is 0, so my scale will be 0. Why? Because I have multiplied the scale value by a 0 number. Now if I scale it up, let's enter 0.2. So my scale will be multiplied by 0.2. Let's multiply it by 0.5. This is the result. Okay. If I multiply it by 1, now we have 100% for the scale value. And if I multiply it by 2, my fire layer will be scaled 200%. Okay. For now, let's leave it at number 0. Okay, let's use this code for other two fire layers. So copy this script and then select these two fire layers and press the S key. Okay, hold the Alt key and click on the stopwatch. Delete this script and paste the code here. And for the third fire layer, follow the same process. Okay. Now we control the wiggle and scale values by this slider. But you can hide this chain for Fire 3 and Fire 2 layers to be able to change these numbers separately later. Okay, now let me change the color for these layers, for example, blue. From now, I animate these fire effects with this fire scale slider. So let's go to frame, for example, 75 and change the slider value to 1. And let's add a keyframe here by clicking on this stopwatch. Now let's go a few frames forward, for example frame 120, and change it to 0.25. And as you can see, our fire layers are getting smaller. Okay, let's go to frame 200 and change the slider value to, for example, 1.5. Okay, let's change the resolution, and now let's see a ramp preview to see what we have now. Okay, great. Now let's see in full screen mode. Okay, great. Now let's modify our animation a little bit. So select Control Layer, press the U key to load all keyframes, select these keyframes, Keyframe Assistant, Easy Ease, or press F9. Okay, now let's make this fire animation a little more interesting by adding some keyframes to have the effect of increasing and decreasing the fire scale when the rocket is in this circle path. So let's go to frame, for example, 130 and change the slider value to 0.35. Let's go 5 frames forward and set it to 1. In frame 140, change it to, for example, 0.1. For frame 145, let's enter 1.5. In frame 150, change it to 0.2. For frame 155, enter 1. And for frame 160, let's enter 0.2. Okay, now let's see a ramp preview in full screen mode. Okay, awesome. We can change the wiggle parameters for our 3 fire layers to have different random scale values. So for fire 1 layer, that is our white fire layer, press the U key 2 times Now let's change the wiggle parameters to 15 and, for example, 10. For Fire 2, let's enter 20 and 15. And finally, for Fire 3, let's enter 30 and 20. Okay, now let's see the result. Okay, great result. I love this effect of increasing and decreasing the fire scale. This adds a little more detail to our animations. As a professional tip, try to add some of these small tweaks to your works to add more layer of animations to your motion graphics. Okay, we don't need to see control layer on the screen, so we can hide it from this corner. Okay, now let me show you how to add a camera and distribute these layers in real 3D space in After Effects. First of all, let's change Active Camera to Custom View 1. Now press the C key on the keyboard or click on this Unified Camera tool. And as you can see, all of our objects are in a single plane. If you left click and drag, you can rotate or orbit the camera around the layers. If you right click and drag your mouse, you can zoom in and zoom out the camera. And if you middle click and drag your mouse, you can pan to the left and right. Okay, I want to distribute these layers in 3D space, so let's start from the bottom layers. Unlock the sky and circles layers. Select the sky layer and press the P key to load the position property. Let's change the Z position value to push back it in 3D space. For example, let's enter 500 for Z position. Okay, it's a proper position. Now let's move the circle layer to back. And for Z position, let's enter 400. For Cloud 3, let's change it to 200. For Cloud 2 layer, change it to, okay, let's change the Z position for Cloud 3. It should be 300. And for Cloud 2 layer, change it to 200. Now, as you can see, our layers are distributed in 3D space. If you click on this camera button, you can see different options for the camera. For example, if you select Track XY camera tool, as I told you before, you can move camera in a XY plane, something like you pan the camera. If you choose Unified Camera tool, you have all these cameras transform tools in your hand. Just use left click, right click, or middle click to access each tool. Or you can press the C key to switch between them. Okay, now I want to move top clouds layers. For top cloud 1, let's leave it in its current position. For top cloud 2, let's change Z position to, for example, 400. And for top cloud 3, let's change the Z position to 250. Okay, now as you can see, we have a nice distance between our objects in 3D space. Okay, great. Now let's switch back to our main view, active camera view. Okay, as you can see, because I pushed back these layers, we need to scale them up to cover the entire screen again, especially for the sky layer. So let's change the scale for a sky layer to, for example, 130. Change the scale value for circles layer to 110. And for Cloud 2 and Cloud 3, let's change the scale to 110. Okay, great. Okay, now I want to animate these layers in X-axis. So select the top Cloud 1 layer and let's go to frame 0. Let's change X position to 350 and set the keyframe here. Then let's go to the last frame and change the X position to, for example, 500. Because our keyframes are linear, and as you can see, these two keyframes are like a diamond in timeline, so our object will move in a constant speed. Now for the top Cloud 2, in frame 0, let's enter 1000. Set a keyframe. Let's go to the last frame and change it to, for example, 1050. As you know, when an object is farther away, it seems to move at a slower speed. So, to simulate it, I move top Cloud 2 less than top Cloud 1. Now for top Cloud 3, in frame 0, let's enter 1600. Set a keyframe. Go to the last frame and change it to, for example, 1700. Okay, as you can see, our top cloud layers are moving nicely. This layer that is near the camera moves faster. this cloud moves a little bit slower, and the middle one moves very slow. Okay, now I want to give the scene a little more 3D feel. To do this, I'm going to add shadows to our cloud layers. So let's select Cloud 1 layer, and from the menu choose Effect, Perspective, Drop Shadow. Okay, for the shadow color, let's pick a dark blue color from the sky. You can also choose a black color, it's up to you. Let's increase the distance, for example 50. Let's increase the softness value because, as you know, clouds don't create sharp shadows. So increase it to 75. And let's change the direction to 75. Okay. You can decrease the opacity if you like, for example 40. And let's change the color to maybe a little bit darker blue. Okay. Now I want to apply these shadow settings to another cloud layer. So select this shadow effect. And from the menu choose Edit, Copy. Now let's select Cloud 2 and paste the effect. Now our second cloud layer drops shadow over the third cloud layer. You can apply the shadow effect to the third cloud layer as well if you like to. Okay, now let's animate these 3 cloud layers. So select Cloud 1 and let's go to frame 0. Open the position property and set a keyframe here. And let's enter a round number, for example 900. Let's go to the last frame and change the X position to, for example, 1100. Okay, as you know, objects that are closer to us seem to move faster. Okay, now I want to animate Cloud 2 in opposite direction to add a little bit diversity. So in frame 0, set a keyframe, enter 700 for X position, and go to the last frame. I decrease the X position because I want to move it in opposite direction of the Cloud 1. So let's enter 600. Now let's scrub in timeline. Okay, as you can see, they are moving in opposite directions. Okay, now for Cloud 3 in frame 0, add a keyframe. Enter 1250 for X position. And for the last keyframe, let's enter 1300. Okay, now if I scrub in timeline, you can see that this front cloud moves faster. It moves 200 pixels. The middle cloud moves a little slower. It moves 100 pixels. And the last cloud moves very slow because it moves only 50 pixels. Okay, let's add a new layer to our clouds. So select Cloud 1 and from the menu choose Edit, Duplicate, or press Ctrl D. Let's change the position a little bit. So select all position keys by clicking on Position Property. Click and drag the layer in Z axis and bring it forward somewhere like here. Okay. Now if I scrub in timeline, as you can see, Cloud 1 and Cloud 4 are moving in the same direction. But I want to reverse the direction for Cloud 4. So select all keyframes again and right click and choose Keyframe Assistant, Time Reverse Keyframes. Now they are moving in opposite directions. Now let's change Cloud 4 a little bit to have different look. So unlink the scale property and change the scale X from 100% to negative 100%. Okay. Let's also change the color of Cloud 1. So from the menu choose Effect, Generate, Fill. Immediately After Effects adds a red color to it. Let's pick a color from Cloud 4 and then let's change it a little bit to a bright gray. Okay, now we have a little difference between these two clouds. Okay, now as you can see, the shadow color of this cloud is changed as well because the fill effect is below the shadow effect. So simply drag this fill effect over the shadow effect. Let's change its color a little more. Okay, now I want to apply a new effect to our clouds to have more motion on the screen, and this will add more details to our animation. So select Cloud 1 and in Effects and Preset panel, find Turbulent Displace effect and apply it to the layer. Let's close these effects. Now change the size value to 50. Hold the Alt key and click on the Evolution stopwatch. Delete this script and enter time times 30. Now if I scrub in timeline, as you can see, the form of the cloud 1 layer is changing. Okay, let's do the same process for cloud 4. Add the turbulent displays, change the size to 50, and add the script to evolution property, time times 35. Because this cloud is closer to the camera, so the turbulent effect should be more obvious. Yes, the shape of this cloud also changes over time. Follow the same process for cloud 2. And for the script, enter time times 20. And let's apply this effect to the cloud 3 layer as well. And for the script, enter time times 10. Because cloud 2 and cloud 3 are so far away from the camera, so their turbulent effects should be less obvious. So I used smaller numbers for them. You can add this turbulent displays effect to these small top clouds as well, it's up to you. Okay, now I want to add and animate a camera. So from the menu, choose Layer, New, Camera. Here I leave the settings as they are, but you can change them if you like. For example, maybe you like to use different focal length for your camera. Okay, now let's go to frame 0 and open the position property, and let's change the Z position to, for example, -2700. Go to the last frame and change the Z position to -2500. Now as you can see, we have a slow movement into space in Z direction. Okay, now let's see a RAM preview to see what we have made until now. Let's see it in full screen mode as well. Okay, awesome. I'm satisfied with the result. Okay, I hope you enjoyed watching this video so far. In the next video, we're going to add more interesting effects to the scene. So don't miss it. Thanks for watching and see you soon.